Garamesh and the Farmer. A fairy tale. Once upon a time there was a girl. A princess, as a matter of fact. She was very beautiful and very kind. She had long blonde hair and silver blue eyes, and her parents loved her more than all the jewels on earth. When she was 17 years old, nearing her 18th birthday, pressure from the castle court compelled her parents to talk to her of marriage. This was not welcome news for the princess. She was young and passionate about her freedom. She preferred hunting alone to reclining at court, and preferred riding clothes to delicate lace dresses. She was altogether unfit to be wed, but her parents assured her that they would not make her marry anyone she did not like, and so the princess relented. On her 18th birthday, a huge celebration was held in the castle hall, where the king and queen announced the eligibility of their only child. Whispers and talk went among the many ladies and lords of the court, on whose son would be favored to gain the crown. Everyone was happy and excited, except the young girl, who spent most of the evening in the corner eating sugary cake with her hunting dog. Some days later, the first set of suitors were brought to the castle to woo the young princess. These men gained entry mostly because they were rich, and she dismissed all of them out of hand without so much as speaking a word to them. They were all too old, or too ugly, or both too old and too ugly. Then the second set of suitors were brought in. They were chosen for the title that they would yet inherit and the political power of their families. She let them stay long enough in the castle to speak with each, but eventually she dismissed them all. They were all either too conceited, too unkind, or too arrogant to see that they were all three. They wanted her only for her wealth and family, and expected that she would act as a coy queen in their own fantasies of rule. Her parents were at an impasse. They spent long nights wondering how they could find a gentleman to satisfy their discerning daughter and still serve the kingdom as ruler. After a fortnight, they came to the princess with an offer. They would open the castle up to eligible men outside of the nobility and would present them with tasks to prove their worth to the princess. At the end of the contests, she would have to marry one of them, provided they had passed the tests of the king and queen, and so satisfy the court with a sound marriage. Feeling that her life was doomed to be one of boredom and imprisonment, the princess relented. At last, the dreaded day came, and the court and magistrates and nobles of the city were assembled in the castle to witness the beginning of the contest. The king and queen stood to the side. The doors were opened, and in came 3 suitors. They were lined up before the twin thrones. One of these was occupied by the princess, with her head resting upon her hand, leaning on her knee, looking both bored and annoyed. "So, what is your claim to fame?" she asked the first man. He was a tall hunter, built of incredible muscle, and with a handsomely trimmed beard. His shoulders were decorated in bearskins, his legs were clad in leather, and he held a great axe. Across his chest was slung a powerful longbow. "I wrestled a bear, this bear," he said as he held up the bear hide, "and I killed it with my own hands. I have hunted the white stag and slain all manner of beasts in the winter tundra. I challenge any man here to eclipse my greatness." "I see that you are indeed brave and strong, sir," the princess said, her head perking up. "How will your strength serve me as husband?" "I shall protect you to my dying breath," said the hunter. "Anyone that wishes to hurt you will have to go through me first, and I cannot be defeated." "Very well, mighty hunter," said the princess. She turned to the next suitor and said, "What about you? What is your claim to fame?" The second man stepped forward. He was a mighty warrior, clad in plate and mail, and carried a heavy, many-notched sword, as long as he was tall, upon his back. "I have slain thousands of men with my sword, Ironbark," he said, and held forth his great sword with his right hand. "I single-handedly won the Battle of Brightmoon, taking charge when the general fell, and leading your armies to victory against the enemy. I challenge any man here to overshadow me." "I see that you are indeed courageous and powerful, Sir Knight," the princess said. "But how will your prowess in battle serve me as husband?" "I will conquer your enemies, expand your kingdom, and raise your standard on foreign lands," said the warrior. "None shall stand that deny the truth of your power." "Very well, Sir Knight," said the princess. She turned to the final suitor and said, "What about you? What is your claim to fame?" The final man stepped forward. He was a young man dressed as a farmer, with simple cloth and a large brimmed hat. His face and arms were tanned from the sun. He carried with him nothing but a leather bag strapped to his back. "I have no claim to fame," he said. "I have done only what has been laid before me. If there were eclipses and shadows, I would stand in them. The sun is very hot." The other 2 suitors laughed at the man, and were soon joined by the assemblage of the court in the castle. Only the princess and the king and queen stood unmoved. "How did you gain audience here?" the king bellowed, shocked to see a humble peasant standing before the lords and ladies of the high court, and bidding among great men for the hand of his beloved daughter. I was sent an invitation. From you, the farmer said with a confused look on his face. He drew from his pocket a rolled piece of parchment, stamped with the royal seal. A nearby guard looked at it and confirmed that it was real, stamped with the king's own ring. The king huffed at the man, but the princess stepped forward and responded anyway. I see that you are indeed a humble man, the princess said. How, with such little claim to greatness, will you serve me as husband? I can only serve you as your need requires, the farmer said. I cannot pretend to be strong or even brave, but I swear if you task me to something, I shall endeavor with all my strength to complete it. Moreover, I shall love you, if you let me. Very well, good farmer, the princess said, and turned to her father. I have met all of the suitors. What shall you task them with to prove their worth in the now? The king, with the suitors now arrayed before him, walked back and forth, measuring each one for his strengths and weaknesses. His gaze lingered on the farmer with contempt. He said, Your first task, if you choose to attempt it, will be a test of strength. I shall be victorious, your highness, the hunter cried. There are none who can match my strength. My body is as granite, and my arms are those of a bear. The warrior eyed the hunter and said darkly, We shall see. The king led the men out into the courtyard of the castle, and the court followed them out. The yard was filled with a series of great stones, ranging from small rocks to immense boulders, and monoliths that had stood there for millennia without being disturbed. This task should be straightforward enough, the king said. Before you are stones from the kingdom. Some of them have stood in this courtyard since time immemorial. Lift the heaviest stone you can. The man who lifts the largest stone off the ground shall win this first task. Aha, said the hunter. He ran forward to an immense stone. He squatted down and straightened his back and strained against the stone. But it did not budge. He tried again to no avail. Disappointed, he went to the next smaller stone, and after much effort lifted it off the ground. He dropped it loudly. Silently, the warrior stepped forward. He took a long look at the stone the hunter had just lifted, then stepped past it to the larger stone. He strained with all his might, and it came off the ground. But an inch, yet it was enough. The onlookers cheered at the feat, having never seen such strength displayed, and believing the contest to be over. The king cast his eyes upon the farmer and was surprised to see a smile. These are strong men, to be sure, he said to the king, but I can tell none of them have spent much time around stone as I have. Stones, both great and small, must be moved before you can plow a field. The farmer stepped into the yard and ambled about, examining each of the stones. The court murmured. At last he approached a small rock, heavy, but not much larger than his head. As he picked it up, the onlookers laughed, thinking he had already conceded the contest. I'm not finished, he yelled as he carried the rock all the way across the courtyard. He placed it firmly in front of a great monolith, the largest rock in the yard. He went back and grabbed an even smaller stone and placed it a few feet away from the immense boulder on the other side. The onlookers were puzzled by the young man's actions, gaffing at him. Some even hurled insults, but he ignored them all. At last, he retrieved a long pole that was sitting as refuse in the yard. He jammed it between the boulder and the large rock he had just placed, then pushed down hard on the end. The onlookers gasped as the monolith moved, first an inch, then another. The farmer worked the long pole up and down until finally the monolith, unmoved since even before the building of the castle, tipped over. It landed on the other small stone with a tremendous clap and began to rock back and forth. He walked over to the stone and began to rotate it in a circle without effort. Is there anywhere you'd prefer to have this, your highness? The farmer shouted to the king. Most impressive, the king said. You can leave it there. This challenge belongs to you. The farmer smiled as he walked back to the other suitors. Unfair, the hunter cried. Deceit, shouted the warrior. I said to lift the largest stone. I did not dictate how it should be done, the king said. Perhaps to my folly, but perhaps not. This is but the first task. Give me a long enough lever and a firm place to rest it, and I can move the world, the farmer said to the king with a bow. Nearby, the princess watched him and smiled. Follow me, and I shall give to you your next task, the king said to the suitors. They, along with the court and the princess, followed the king outside the castle and out of the town wall, past a long lane of houses, and to the edge of the wood. The king turned and looked at them. I do not grieve that my kingdom and its capital has grown, but alas, my subjects have moved outside my walls, and thus my ability to keep them safe has been diminished. This next task will test both your strength as well as your endurance, and will also be a chance for you to serve my kingdom directly.
"Victory shall be mine," the soldier shouted. "I have outlasted all my opponents on the battlefield, snatching victory by having the strength to continue swinging my sword when others fell dead with exhaustion."
Nearby, the hunter grumbled,
"We shall see."
"You will extend the walls to here, building each of you a piece of it. The quarry is beyond the river there," the king said as he pointed away to the woods. "You will have to gather the cut stones there and place them yourselves to build the wall here. Whoever has built the most of their section of the wall by sundown will be the victor." The hunter and warrior both set off in a dash, charging toward the river in step. The farmer stood for a moment, then turned to the princess. He smiled at her and said, "Your beauty knows no bounds." Then he took off his hat and bowed. The king scowled at him, and the crowd grumbled amongst themselves as they watched the farmer walk, in the opposite direction, into the city. "Perhaps he is giving up then," the king said to his daughter. "I do not blame him." "Perhaps," the princess said with a sly smile. In a few minutes the warrior and hunter returned, each carrying a heavy cut stone on their shoulders. They both threw the stones down on the earth the city mason had cleared for them, huffed, then ran back toward the quarry. They repeated this as the sun moved above them, then into the west, getting noticeably more tired with each trip. The court had almost forgotten about the farmer when he approached from the road walking beside a large workhorse, pulling a wagon. Behind him, several more wagons were being pulled, all led by other men, and all of them stacked with cut stones from the quarry. When he saw this, the warrior shouted to the king, "Your Highness, he is cheating! You said we must lay the stones ourselves." "I did indeed say that," the king replied, "but nobody has yet laid a stone for him." "Victory will still be mine," said the warrior. He dropped another heavy stone on the now forming wall and jogged back in the direction of the quarry. Meanwhile, the farmer rolled the wagon up to his section of the bare earth. A young man walking beside him began to hand him the stones from the wagon, one at a time. An old man stood beside him, talking quietly, and within minutes the beginnings of the wall formed. Not only that, but soon the wall was as tall and broad as the warriors and hunters, and looked much better by comparison. The first wagon pulled away, and another laden with stone pulled up. The stacking of stones continued. Ever curious, the princess went down to talk to the farmer. "Tell me," she said, "where were you, and how you managed to do all this?" "Even a poor farmer has some friends, my lady," he said. "Of course, I should tell you that the sun has not yet set, so you have yet to see just what I have managed to do. One of the wagons was my own. This one belongs to the milkman, but it sits idle in the afternoon, so he lent me its use in exchange for a day's worth of grain for his cattle. This young man here is the blacksmith's apprentice, and he needs leather for an apron of his own, which I just happen to have from a recent slaughter." "I see," the princess said. "And what about this old man?" "You're too young to remember me," the old man said. "He's the most important part," the farmer said. "I knew I could build a wall faster than my friends, the hunter and the warrior, but—" "Friends," the princess interrupted. "That's not what I would call them." "Bear with me, my lady," the farmer said with a bow. "I knew I could build this wall faster, but it was not enough for me to simply build your wall quickly. It must also be fine and strong and worthy of your kingdom. So I went to find the best stonemason in the kingdom." "The best stonemason in the kingdom is in the employ of my father," the princess said. "And I am his father," the old man said. "If you want the best teacher," said the farmer, "you must find the one who taught the best, and we always learn the most from our parents. And the best part about the wise is that they know the value of things," said the farmer. "He agreed to help me in exchange for the last of my father's wine, a vintage most rare and most enjoyable." "Finer than what is contained in the castle cellar," said the princess. "Don't worry," said the farmer. "You will get to judge the truth of my statement. I have saved a bottle for our wedding, should I be so lucky as to win." "Indeed," the princess said, "though I'm beginning to lose my doubt in you. I will hold you to that." The princess looked upon the wall the farmer was building and found the stonework to be of impeccable quality. Under the supervision of the old stonemason, it had been so tightly built that it would have functioned as a dike in a flood. Her opinion of the humble farmer was changing rapidly. Soon the sun began to set, and the warrior and the hunter were perplexed and angry at the farmer's progress. Filled stone carts continued to drive up to replace the ones he emptied, and the wall became so tall and broad, more stones could no longer be placed on top of it without a ladder. Just then, the walls of the warrior and the hunter both fell over due to their hasty and shoddy construction. In frustration, they attempted to correct their errors, furiously restacking the stones to at least reach second place. Finally, the sun set, and the king held out his arms and said,
Your time has run out, and the victor is clear."
The warrior and the hunter collapsed in disappointment.
"Lament not," the king said to them, "for there is yet another challenge for you, and this one is the greatest and most important, and will put all your skills, as well as your courage, to the test. You may retire in the castle for the night."
Wearily, the hunter and the warrior stood and began walking back toward the castle. The king noticed the farmer as he continued to work, stacking stones into the sections reserved for his competitors.
"Farmer, the competition is over for the day," he said.
"The competition, yes," the farmer said, "but not the work, as you can see, your majesty." "Come back to the castle," the princess said to the farmer, "and you can dine at my table as an honored guest."
"Nothing would please me more," the farmer said, and quickly took a knee. "But this was to be a contest of endurance, and I haven't yet showed you how hard a farmer can work. Moreover, you and your subjects deserve a wall."
"I shall dine here, then," the princess said, "and keep you company."
"Much obliged," said the farmer, and so he worked until dark, and then into the night, by moon and torchlight, until the wall was built solidly across the entire space cleared for the competition. All the while the princess sat and stood with him. She talked and laughed with him long into the night about things both simple and fanciful. When the waxing moon had moved into the west and he was finished, the princess said to him, "You must be tired, Sir Farmer. We have prepared arrangements for all the suitors at the castle. You will sleep in comfort tonight."
"I do not wish to offend you, your highness," the farmer said, "but the king led me to believe that tomorrow's competition will be the hardest yet, so I think I will retire to my own house, as long as it doesn't upset you. After all, you always sleep best in your own bed." "Then I shall see you on the morrow," the princess said. "Sleep well."
"I shall," the farmer said. "There's no nightcap quite like a full day of work."
And so he walked the miles home to his own house and his own bed, and tended to his own business, then slept. The next morning, but a little while after sunrise, the king called for the suitors to be assembled in the main hall, to receive their final task in the competition for the hand of the beautiful princess. He had a mind to not only make this task the most difficult and perilous, but to make it count above the other two, for he had become perturbed at the clever victories of the lowly farmer. He became more perturbed still when he walked into the hall, expecting to make preparations for his address, and found the farmer sitting there waiting for him.
"You move quickly," the king said. "I only just sent my messenger to rouse you suitors."
"Begging your pardon, your majesty," the farmer said, taking off his great hat, "but I received no message. I've been here an hour waiting to hear your next task." "I trust you've slept well in your own bed," a sweet voice said from behind the farmer. The king was surprised to see the princess enter into the assembly hall and sit near the farmer.
"Ah, my lady, but I wish that were true," the farmer said. "I arrived home only to find my mare, who has robbed me of her work this past month due to pregnancy, lying on her side in painful labor. I spent most of the night delivering a newborn colt, and so I slept little."
"Did the mare survive?" the princess asked.
"I'm happy to say she did, as did the colt. Otherwise I might not have been able to come," the farmer said. "The troubles of poor farmers should not interfere with the life of our future queen," the king said, spitting his words.
The princess ignored her father and said, "I would have sent a servant to give you the task."
"I appreciate it, my lady," the farmer said.
Soon the court was seated, and the other two suitors entered the grand hall. The princess took her place beside the king and queen in awaiting the final task to be given by the king. The king held out his hands, and the room went silent.
"My dear lords and ladies," he said, "we have seen some great feats of strength, endurance," the king eyed the farmer as he said, "and cleverness. But we have not yet seen a test of true valor. Would the Lord of Greenfield do me the honor of giving this court news of his lands?"
A very tall and well-arrayed lord stepped forward from his peers and cleared his throat.
"Yes, my king, my charge. The simple farming village of Greenfield, north of the city, has suffered great fear this past fortnight. The legendary dragon of the Black Mountain has awakened again, surely to wreak destruction on our land. His terrible cries can be heard in the morning and evening, and at night a great red glow can be seen emanating from a crack in the face of the rock. And so now," the king said to the suitors and the court, "your final task, a task which only one of you shall be able to complete, is laid before you. Go forth and slay the terrible dragon with whatever weaponry, strength, or," he looked at the farmer again, "wit you possess. Whosoever brings me back a trophy of the kill, such as the head of the beast, I shall name the victor once and for all."
At this thought, both the warrior and hunter shuddered on the inside, though they both remained proud and stern as they stood before the council. They had expected the contests to be mostly in sport, and neither one had actually expected to be putting his life at risk, and nobody there had anticipated that the contest would include the slaying of an actual dragon.
"Finally, a contest worthy of my skills,"
the hunter said, proudly putting aside his internal fear.
"If I cannot deliver a trophy worthy of a queen, then nobody can." "One cannot simply hunt a dragon," the warrior said in reply. "Fighting a dragon is a battle. No, a war. Only I can bring home victory. You shall see."
The farmer remained silent, scratching his chin, and soon realized the eyes of the assembly were upon him.
"What say you, peasant?" the king said. "Does your heart now misgive you? You are clever, to be sure, but I will not think you any less wise if you were to return to your fields."
The farmer thought a moment and said, "I don't really know a thing about slaying dragons, but I doubt my friends here know any more than I do. I'll give it a shot. What's the worst that could happen?"
"You will die,"
the warrior said proudly. "If you think death is the worst fate in this world, you must have spent precious little time engaged in the art of war," the farmer said softly.
"Don't make me laugh, peasant," the warrior sneered.
"Do you really think that's all I've ever been?" the farmer replied.
"You will be torn to pieces," the hunter said angrily.
"If you think physical pain is the worst fate you fall upon in the hunt, you must have spent precious little time stalking prey," the farmer said with calm resolve.
"What would you know about it?"
the hunter said with vitriol. "The fields do not always yield bounty," was the farmer's reply. The hunter and the warrior each bared their teeth in anger, taking insult from the farmer's cool and calm words. Near at hand, the princess smiled and whispered something to her mother.
"Go then," the king said, "with the blessing of your king and for the service of the kingdom."
The room cleared and the court vacated. The hunter and the warrior stormed out of the building proudly, but the farmer remained behind, sitting in a chair, apparently lost in thought. The princess waited for her father to leave, then approached him. "Perhaps it is best if you return home for this one, my friend," she said. "Have I not yet earned your faith?" the farmer said. "You have my respect," she said, "but the slaying of something so great as a dragon is best left to men of steel and strength." "I am a man of steel," the farmer said. "I made my plow out of it with my own hands. I am a man of strength, too, for with my horse lamed I have plowed the hard earth with my own legs." "You know what I mean," the princess said. "I care about you. Don't throw your life away." "If I threw my life away, how could I ever earn my life with you?" the farmer said. The simple statement touched the heart of the princess, and she fled away on the verge of tears. Being finally alone, the farmer sat and thought, and then after a time left. He went home to his farm and thought some more. He gathered the things he thought he might need on the trip to Greenfield in the north: a backpack, a rope, a cooking pot and a knife, and an old musket belonging once to his father, now rarely used. In the afternoon a wagon came by, driven by a royal servant. The messenger drove the wagon up to the farmer's front door, then jumped out and bowed low. "Greetings," he said. "I come bearing gifts from the princess of the realm to aid you on your perilous quest." The farmer looked through the pile of gifts. In the bed of the wagon lay a suit of armor of incredible make, decorated with marvelous inscriptions and jewels. A sword and a shield went with it, equally baroque in their design, along with a well-crafted long gun inlaid with gold. "I cannot use these," he said to the servant. "What? Why?" the servant said, shocked. "The trek to the top of Black Mountain is a long one," the farmer said. "Armor, however wondrous a protection, will only weigh me down and make the ascent impossible." "What about the sword and the shield?" the servant asked. "Great works of art, to be sure, but not battle-tested," said the farmer. "Moreover, I'm no good with such things, and a conflict with a dragon is no place to learn new battle skills." "And I suppose even this rifle, the princess's own, I'll have you know, is no good for you," the servant said. "I'm sure it's a marvelous gun, and serves the princess well," the farmer said. "But every gun has its own shot pattern, and this one's shall be unfamiliar to me. I'm better off sticking with my own musket. It always shoots to the right, but I know by how much, as if it were second nature." "Very well," the servant said. "I shall carry back your callous refusal to Her Majesty." "Wait," the farmer said. The servant smiled with pleasure at first, but was shocked when the farmer disappeared into his house and returned with a rolled piece of parchment. "Here, take this to the princess," he said as he handed the paper to the servant. "It's the deed to my farm. Tell the princess that it's been in my family for generations, but I have no children, and so if I die in this task, I want it given to my neighbor's youngest. He is unlikely to get any inheritance." The servant, now humbled by the farmer's grace, bowed and said, "Is there anything I, Her Majesty's servant, could offer you?" The farmer eyed the wagon and said, "I could use one of your horses for the trip. You can have my mare next week in exchange, after she's recovered from a difficult birth." "But, sir," the servant said, "these are work horses, not war horses." "All the better," the farmer said. "You shall have it, sir, and forget about the exchange. Just return him to the stable when you finish." The servant bowed and left the strong wagon horse with the farmer, letting the remaining horse take the wagon away. So, the farmer was now ready for his journey to the Black Mountain. He loaded up his horse with food and other things he would need, and packed some extra ammunition for his musket. He set off on the road riding the strong workhorse of the royal wagon, still wondering to himself how he would win this challenge. It took him the rest of the day and all of the next to reach Greenfield. When he arrived, he saw that the village there was full of fearful people, choosing to remain shut in their houses rather than tend to their farms and herds. Only one person, an old man, bent over a walking stick, was unafraid and walked in the open. "Excuse me," the farmer said politely, dismounting and bowing for the old peasant. "Might I have a moment of your time?"
"I have precious few moments left," the old man said. "But since you ask nicely, you can have a few."
"Is there really a dragon in Black Mountain?" the farmer asked.
"Sure is," the old man said. "Are you with those other two idiots that came through here yesterday, thinking they could slay Garamesh?"
"Garamesh," the farmer said with confusion.
"That's the name of the dragon."
"How do you know that's his name?" the farmer said, "if you don't mind me asking."
"I don't," the old man said. "That's what he told me his name is. Now, are you with those other two fools or not?"
"No. Well, yes," the farmer scratched his head. "Sort of?"
The old man laughed at him. "You'd be better off not, but don't let me stop you from being a fool."
"You said you met the dragon," the farmer said. The old man cracked a wry smile.
I did. I'm old enough to remember the dragon before he went to sleep, not like most of these quaking peasants."
"Sleep," the farmer said. Apparently there was more to dragons than he realized.
"Dragons are powerfully old," the old man said, "practically immortal, and all that time wears on the mind. They go into a deep sleep for a few hundred years every millennia. Garamesh should still be sleeping."
"But he's awakened, is that the problem?" the farmer asked.
"Something's waking him up," the old man said. "I'd go up and see him, have a chat with him if I could, but I'm not as well preserved as a dragon."
"You're not afraid to walk into his lair?" the farmer said, in wonder of the old man.
"I'm too old to be afraid of dying. Besides, even if the dragon were the cruel beast my fellows think he is, he could come down here and burn everyone's houses to cinders any time he wanted," the old man said. "Might as well get on with life instead of being afraid."
"Perhaps I could take you up the mountain to see him," the farmer said. "I have a horse, after all."
"No, I'm too old to climb mountains and ride horses," the old man said.
"Then perhaps I could go for you," the farmer said.
"Not the wisest thing in the world, going to speak with an angry dragon," the old man said. "But I won't stop you. Tell him little Timmy sent you."
"I will, sir," the farmer said with a bow. "Thank you." And so the farmer set off up the winding path to the heart of the Black Mountain. It took more than a day of hard climbing with the horse to reach the point where the hard, black rock of the mountain began, and the trees began to become more sparse. During the night, the mountain was aglow with strange orange and red lights, and the ground shook with deep booms and eerie noise. Finally, at the end of the second day, he reached the cleft in the mountain that he had been told held the dragon's lair. He left his horse at the entrance, for the beast was too frightened of the awful noises to proceed any further, and went into the narrow canyon on foot. He began to hear something different than the loud noises of the dragon as he approached, and near the entrance to the dragon's lair, which was a great black cave, he found the hunter lying on the ground. The man was gravely injured, with burn marks and gashes covering his body, but he was alive.
"I guess it's your turn to try," the hunter said. "But don't say I didn't warn you. If he could kill me, he could kill anyone."
"You're not dead yet," the farmer said, and picked the great strong man up on his shoulders. It was difficult, but he carried him all the way to the end of the canyon, then began to tend to his wounds with bandages and medicine from his pack.
"Why are you helping me?" the hunter asked.
"Because you do the same for me," the farmer said.
"No, I wouldn't," said the hunter.
The farmer put the injured hunter on his horse and sent him back down the mountain, keeping for himself a small amount of food, a bag of tools, and his old musket, though he didn't intend to use it. He walked back to the entrance of the dragon's lair. The loud noises were now deafening, and the dark cave had its own glow. His heart trembled, and his knees shook as he entered. He walked down a long passageway, and then approached the inner room, glowing with the dragon's fire.
"Garamesh?"
he said quietly. He sucked up his courage a bit more and called out louder,
"Garamesh!"
The rumbling paused for a moment. A loud voice, booming and deep, came back to him.
"Another man wishing to try his luck against the wicked dragon, eh?"
"No," the farmer yelled back. "Little Timmy sent me."
"Little Timmy,"
the dragon boomed back.
Yes. How is the child?"
"He's not a child any longer," the farmer said, peeking his head into the central room. He saw the dragon, a massive worm with scales of mottled black and red, lying on the floor, flames coming in and out of his nose and mouth. His great wings, of red flesh between jet-black ribs like those of a massive bat, were folded over his large legs.
"In the time you've slept, he's grown to be a man, then withered to old age, but he remembers you."
"And I remember him," the dragon said. "You may come closer, but don't think that boomstick on your back will do anything against me."
"Of course not," the farmer said. He walked into the room until he was standing before the dragon. The dragon was even bigger up close, if such a thing was possible. When the farmer was beside the dragon's head, his shoulders barely reached the lips of the great worm.
"So,"
the farmer said, doing his best to suppress the fear and trembling in his voice,
"what has awakened the great Garamesh after so many decades of slumber?"
"It's just Garamesh. I may be big, but that doesn't make me great,"
the dragon boomed. The hall rumbled as the dragon broke into a groan.
"I have slowly been tortured awake for a few years, and it seems like I shall never get any rest. As you can tell, it makes me a bit cranky."
"What's the problem?" the farmer said. "Can I help?"
"Perhaps," the dragon said. "Though I am an eternal being, I am still affected by your mortal realm from time to time. I have a rotten tooth, I think, and it is upsetting my stomach. I'm breathing fire even as I try to sleep."
"How can a rotten tooth be giving you a sour stomach?" the farmer asked. The dragon opened his maw up wide, and the farmer then understood. Dragons, it seemed, had more teeth than the frightening rows of sharp fangs near the lips. The roof of the dragon's mouth, his throat, and his entire gullet were covered in various kinds of teeth. Some of them were large, sharp teeth, like those on the outside of a dragon's mouth, but most were long and flat, like the molars of a cow. "My, that's a lot of teeth," the farmer said.
"Is it?"
said the dragon.
"How many do you have?"
28, said the farmer, "but I am lucky to have kept all of mine. Rotten teeth are perhaps more common in humans than dragons."
"How do you eat anything at all with such few teeth?" said the dragon.
"I don't think we have to eat very much by comparison," the farmer said. "What on earth do you eat that requires so many teeth?"
"Rocks, of course," the dragon said. "If you were expecting me to say maidens and warriors, I'm sorry to let you down."
"Why rocks?" the farmer said.
"Eternal beings must eat eternal things," the dragon said. "Will you help me extract this infernal tooth? I cannot reach it."
"I suppose I could try," said the farmer. He gasped as the dragon opened its mouth wide, creating in his throat a massive tooth-lined cave with a bright glow at the end. He grabbed his sack of tools and said, "Here goes nothing." The rows of teeth felt quite strange on his feet as he marched down the cavern that was the dragon's gullet. "Please don't eat me," he said aloud. He almost fell over as the floor beneath him shook with laughter. Finally, he found the rotten tooth near the end of the tunnel. It was steaming hot from the fire in the dragon's belly, and the farmer began to sweat as he looked at the gray tooth set in swollen flesh. He removed from his pack a long pair of pliers. They were far too small to fit around the large tooth. Next, he tried a set of long forceps from his forge. They fit, but he could not get the tooth to budge, and the dragon growled in pain, sending flames up his throat, which licked the farmer and singed the edges of his clothes and hair. Lastly, the farmer withdrew a pry bar. "I'm sorry, but this is going to hurt," he shouted. He dug into the flesh around the tooth, prying the tooth up a little from each edge. The dragon groaned again in pain, and the farmer began to fear for his life as the flames got hotter. After much effort, the tooth was free. It was even bigger than it looked, set into the dragon's throat, with long, twisting roots blackened with rot. The farmer quickly scooped it up under his arm, gathered up his tools, and ran out of the dragon's throat. As soon as the farmer left the dragon's mouth, Garamesh flipped over on his back and groaned. It shook the cave, but in its tones the farmer detected a note of relief.
So much better, the dragon said. Thank you.
You're welcome, the farmer said. May I keep the tooth?
Why on earth would you want a rotten tooth? Do you plan to use it as a bar stool?
Said the dragon. The hall rumbled and shook, and the farmer realized it was laughter, louder and deeper than any he'd heard. The farmer looked at the tooth again and chuckled. I suppose I could, but no. I came here because the king placed your murder upon me as a task. The dragon laughed.
As if a mortal could slay me. Do you still wish to attempt it?
No, all I need to say is I did, and I bring a trophy of my victory. The tooth will do, the farmer said.
I will do you one. No, two better.
The dragon reached up to his mouth with his monstrous claw and removed in one quick stroke one of the sharp fangs that lined his lips. He handed it to the farmer, who held it aloft. It was the size of a large sword and sharp on two edges like a blade, but was wondrously light.
Take this, one of my favorite teeth. It will never bend, nor break, nor rust, and will cut steel and stone alike. More than that, it will poison your enemies. It is the weapon of a god.
Thank you, the farmer said. That is an excellent gift. Next, the dragon pried from his hide a large scale of mottled black and red, and set it in front of the farmer. The farmer picked it up and held it in the strange light of the dragon. It was stiff and strong and beautiful, but like the tooth, also wondrously light.
This is one of my favorite back scales. It is impervious to steel, arrows, fire, and your zooming lead balls, too. It is a shield worthy of a god.
If these are not prize enough, nothing else will do, said the farmer. Thank you.
Thank you, said the dragon, and tell little Timmy I send my regards. I would go see him, but...
The dragon yawned.
I find myself so sleepy right now. Perhaps I shall send my spirit to the afterlife in a few years to check upon him.
I will, and farewell, the farmer said. He carried the prizes out of the cave and down the long ravine. He was glad the prizes were so light, because he knew the trek back down the mountain would be long and difficult without his horse, even though he would spend most of it walking downhill. He walked until the sun went down, then walked under the nearly full moon as long as his legs could carry him. And the mountain above the slumbering dragon no longer rumbled the earth, and from his lair no glow could be seen. The farmer settled down to sleep under the stars, but became scared again when he heard the howling of wolves in the forest. As he lay there, he pulled the dragon scale over himself as a shield, and held the fang firmly in his right hand as a sword. Eventually, the security of his treasures comforted him, and he slept. Sometime in the early morning, the farmer awoke to a set of sounds most unsettled. He sat up quickly and saw the warrior above him, his massive sword raised high in preparation for a killing stroke. The farmer raised his arm in fear, and the warrior's sword connected with the dragon scale, still strapped to the farmer's arm. It bounced off the impenetrable shield with a loud gong, rattling the warrior's arms. The warrior struck again and again, each time connecting with the dragon scale, and each time finding all of his force being pushed back into the sword, while the farmer felt almost nothing. At that moment, the farmer came to understand something more of the immortality of dragons, and how futile the efforts of the suitors would have been in slaying the mythical being, for the dragon was covered with such armor. It repelled not only the edge of the blade, but redirected all of the force of the blow back into the attacker. At last, the warrior's mighty sword Ironbark shattered into pieces. In desperation, he tackled the farmer with his bare hands. In the ensuing struggle, the warrior cried out, and the farmer managed to gain the upper hand and pin him. What he saw as he held down the warrior chilled him. The warrior had been cut by the dragon tooth as he tackled the farmer. It was not a deep cut, nor a long one, but as the farmer held down the warrior, he could see the dragon's claim of poison to be true. The warrior was breaking out in sweats, and his color was fading rapidly. The farmer stood up and said, "Wait here, I'll go find help," wondering how he might stop the action of the dragon's poison. The warrior, now paralyzed, said, "Finish me off!" "That I will not do, my friend," said the farmer. "I'm not your friend," said the warrior. "I'm your competition. I'm your enemy." "We'll see about that," was all the farmer had to say on the matter. With that, he headed back up the mountain to see the dragon, hoping he might know how to counteract the poison. He marched back up the mountain, a most difficult climb without the help of a horse, all day until he again reached the cleft in the mountain. It was shortly before sunset when he walked back into the dragon's lair to find Garamesh sleeping soundly. "Garamesh!" the farmer called into the echoing chamber. The dragon continued to sleep, his snoring like a great rumbling in the deep. "Garamesh, please wake up!" he called again, louder. His voice filled the chamber, but the dragon did not stir. Defeated, he sat down beside the sleeping worm. Silently, he prayed to the dreamer for the dragon to awaken.
What is it now, my friend? The dragon said suddenly. That is so important. You must call out to the Lord of my dreams.
The farmer stood up. I have cut a man with your tooth, and he lies sick with poison. Is there any way to make an antidote?
Why would you cut a man with my tooth, The dragon said sleepily.
I didn't mean to, the farmer said. He was attacking me, and it happened during the struggle.
It sounds like he's your enemy, if he's attacking you. Why would you want to cure him? The dragon said.
He's not my enemy, just another competitor in a silly contest, the farmer said.
Ah, the one where you fools were told by another fool to try and kill me, the dragon said with a deep laugh. Well, it makes sense that he would try to take your prizes, seeing as he would have no hope of scratching me himself. That doesn't sound like the action of a very good man. Are you sure you want to cure him?
I am, said the farmer.
He'll probably just go hurt someone else if you let him live, the dragon said.
Please, the farmer said, folding his hands before the dragon.
Very well, the dragon said. If you paid attention the last time you were here, you would know that the sword poisons your enemies. All you have to do is make it so he is no longer your enemy.
How do I do that? The farmer said, frustrated.
Leave it to a man to ask a timeless being a question that his 4-year-old daughter could answer without a beat, the dragon said with a laugh. He must want your forgiveness, and you must give it to him. Is that all?
Yes, I suppose so, said the farmer. Thank you.
You're welcome. See you soon, said the dragon, and added with a chuckle. Well, soon to me. It will be a very, very long time for you.
With that, he closed his eyes and went back to sleep. The farmer spent all night coming back down from the mountain, arriving at his camp from the night before, shortly before dawn. He was relieved to see that the warrior, though still paralyzed, was alive. Listen, the farmer said to the warrior. You have to ask for my forgiveness in order for the poison to wear off.
What?
Said the warrior. His face, the only thing he could move, wore a look of confusion. The farmer sighed and said, The dragon poison. In order for it to wear off, we must no longer be enemies. You have to ask for my forgiveness. Then I have to grant it.
I will not, said the warrior angrily. I would rather die 1,000 times than suffer the shame of begging for forgiveness.
Then there is nothing I can do for you, the farmer said. Sadly, he gathered up his things, but he could not bear to leave the warrior helpless, lying on the ground. He quickly reworked his backpack into a stretcher using a few tree limbs, placed the warrior upon it, then began to drag him further down the mountain. Even though he was weary and worn, the farmer dragged the warrior all the way to the village of Greenfield. There he found again the old man who called himself Little Timmy. Is there any way I could barter with someone in the village for a horse or a wagon? He said to the old man. I have this sword I can trade. He held out his dragon tooth.
I have a horse, the old man said, but tell me, why would you keep the shield and not the sword? Surely the sword is more valuable. I have found the shield more useful, and the sword to be a burden, said the farmer. Well, keep both, the old man said with a laugh. You can have my horse. What do I need it for?
And so, after giving Garamesh's regards to Timmy, the farmer slung the warrior over the saddle of the horse, and set out to walk back to the castle. After many miles he stopped to rest and make camp, laying the warrior on his back near the fire to keep him warm.
Why do you torture me so? Cried the warrior after many hours of silence.
Is the fire too warm? I thought you might catch cold, the farmer said.
No, said the warrior angrily. Carting me all around the country instead of killing me or leaving me to die.
I thought, since you would not make amends with me, I would take you to the city, the farmer said. There we can find someone to care for you, since you cannot move.
You seek to shame me beyond all that should be possible, said the warrior. What good is a soldier who cannot do anything but talk?
As a commander, a great deal, though I see your point, said the farmer. I'm sorry, but I just don't think I could leave you to die.
Fine, the warrior said. I apologize. I'm sorry. I was cruel and selfish, and it was dishonorable for me to try to take the spoils of your kill.
I accept your apology, said the farmer, and I forgive you for what it's worth. With that, the warrior felt warmth returning to his limbs. He began to tickle and itch, and after an hour was able to move his fingers and toes. By the time the fire died down, he could sit up, and by morning he could stand. With the sunrise, the farmer and the warrior set off back to the city. The farmer made the warrior ride the horse, for he was still weak from the poisoned cut. When they arrived, they found the entire city had come out to see their return. The people cheered and they screamed. They danced and they played music. After a time, the farmer realized they were cheering for the warrior who rode on the horse. When they arrived at the castle, The king and the court applauded. The wounded hunter sat off to the side, and he applauded too. The king came down and placed rich red robe upon the warrior, and a gold circlet upon his brow. "I knew the strongest would triumph," he said cheerfully. "You have won the contest, good Sir Knight, and—" "It is not I who won, your highness," the warrior interrupted. The court stopped applauding. The lords and ladies looked to each other in confusion. "It was the farmer who earned victory, both over the dragon and me. I rode the horse because I was too weak to walk." "Is this true?" the king said, shock on his face. "It is true," said the farmer. "I have brought you 2 treasures from mighty Garamesh, the dragon of Black Mountain, though I count one to be more a burden than a prize." He strode forward and laid the dragon-toothed sword and dragon-scale shield at the feet of the king. The king picked up each of them as the farmer spoke. "The first is the favorite tooth of Garamesh. It can cut both steel and stone, and will poison your enemies." "Marvelous," said the king, holding the dragon-toothed sword aloft. "It is so light." "But deadly, your highness," said the farmer. "The second is the scale of Garamesh. It is impervious to fire, steel, and lead bullets." "It too is almost as light as a feather," said the king. "More than that, I have found that whatever force is put upon it, the shield will turn out again upon your foe," the farmer said. "The blows of a giant will feel like those of a child." "I am nearly speechless," said the king. "How can this be?" Beside him, the princess smiled. "There is clearly more than meets the eye to your champion," the queen said. "Alas that this stranger came unbidden to challenge me, but I will always hold to my word," the king said, "for that is the way of kings in all things. You are victorious, humble farmer, for you have humbled even the king. You shall have my consent to marry my daughter." "But you shall not have mine," the queen said. The court gasped in shock. Silence fell over the hall. Then she said with a smile, "Not yet." "You are not the ruler," a man in the court said aloud. The queen turned to the king and said, "Would you, my husband, deny me in my claim to my daughter?" "Never, my love," the king said. "The privilege shall always be yours, and yours alone. The suitor will do your bidding, or else be denied forever." "Very well," the queen said. "This task shall fall to all of you, though if any of you find yourselves frail of heart, you may turn back." The queen looked to each of the suitors. "You will not lose my respect, though you may lose the contest." The hunter and warrior seemed less than enthusiastic, but stood up proudly. "Let's have it and be done with it," the hunter shouted, forgetting his manners. The queen chuckled, then said, "You will each give my daughter a gift. Your task will be to find the gift that delights her most, the thing which she shall treasure beyond all others. You shall have till the end of the day tomorrow to bring your gifts here, to the court of the king." "A gift, that's it," the hunter said, then finally remembering his manners said, "Your highness." "I think you will find, as I have, how difficult it is to please my daughter," the queen said. To her side, the princess covered her mouth in a giggle. "Now go. I would wish you good luck, but I know it will not avail you." The queen clapped her hands, and in dismissal the talking among the court rose to a din. The hunter and warrior walked out wearily, wondering to themselves what they would purchase to impress the princess, and also very thankful that there would be no more contests of a physical nature. The farmer, however, stayed behind, sitting in a chair with his head in his hands. Once the court had cleared, the princess again approached him. "Why are you so sad?" she asked as she sat beside him. "I'm not sad, just tired," said the farmer. "Don't lie to me," the princess said. "I can tell it is more than that." "I'm sorry," said the farmer. "I'm just wondering how I shall buy a gift for you. I'm not a wealthy man, nor an artisan capable of crafting you a treasure of gold. I could mortgage all that I own, and I am sad to say it would buy me little more than a plain gold ring for you." "Then I would treasure it," said the princess, "but I would never ask you to throw away what little you have to please me." "What would please you, your highness?" the farmer asked. "Something from the heart would mean the most to me," the princess said. She kissed him lightly on the cheek, sending his heart aflutter, and walked away wearing a smile. Just before she left the hall, she said, "I look forward to seeing what you will come up with." The farmer left the castle and traveled home, still very tired. He arrived at his homestead and looked around. The things he had were valuable to him, but he knew that they would fetch little value if he sold them. Perhaps he could acquire a small lump of gold, but nothing spectacular enough for a princess. He thought about how he could give her something from his heart, and decided he would try to make her something. He headed out to his forge and heated up some iron. He banged and shaped the iron as best he could, but since he had spent his life only in the making of horseshoes, plows, and wagon guards, He could not hammer the iron into any beautiful shape. All that came out of his effort was an ugly, misshapen lump. He sighed and tossed the iron to the side. Next, he got out his woodworking tools and decided he would try his hand at carving something beautiful for the princess. He picked out some of his best wood and tried to carve it into something beautiful, but all of his experience with wood was in the making of simple buildings and furniture. His first attempt came out as a poor-looking dragon. For his second, he attempted to make a visit to the princess, but it came out looking equally bad. He sighed and decided to at least try to make something that he knew how to make. He spent the next hours carefully making a jewelry box out of oak. He carved the small drawers and sanded the surfaces smooth. As he set out the lacquer to dry, he looked on it and sighed again. It was as good a jewelry box as he could make, but nothing close to the standards of a princess. Still, it was better than nothing. He sat down on his porch and thought about it. The sun began to set and cast many-colored clouds on the horizon. He decided that he ought to try again for something different. Something from the heart, he repeated to himself. Blood? No, that's much too gruesome. Maybe something that is meaningful to my heart. He got up and retrieved from his dresser drawer an old tarnished silver necklace with a pendant that had a mirror upon it, with a dragon smoking a pipe on the reverse. It was an old item that belonged to his mother, and he liked to get it out and look at it from time to time to remember her. This means a lot to me. Maybe she will like it too. He sat back down on the chair on the porch and examined it in the moonlight. This means something, but it is not from my heart, the farmer said sadly. It was then he looked up at the full moon and, remembering his mother, had an idea. The next day came and went. At the end of the day, all three of the suitors gathered again together outside of the king's great hall. The court was assembled, and all the fine lords and ladies lined the walls and the balconies, and the nooks and crannies of the throne room. The door was opened, and the three men were brought in. The queen silenced the crowd and said, "Who shall go first?" "I will," the warrior said, and stepped forward. He was arrayed now in his formal garb, which was a stunning white military uniform with many medals pinned upon it, and with a gold-inlaid sword strapped to his hip. He drew from his pocket a small box. He kneeled before the princess and opened the box. Inside was a wondrous thing, a bright and shining gold ring with a huge diamond set among incredibly detailed filigree. The diamond sparkled and cast points of light across the room, almost as if it glowed with its own inner light. "This ring contains the famed diamond of Artifia," the warrior said. "It is the largest and most valuable jewel in the north, and it is said that it was made by the goddess herself for her own treasure. I cut it from the hand of the Mountain King during the end of our war with the Empire, earning great fame for you and your kingdom. I saved this prize for someone truly special. I give it to you." He bowed his head and held up the ring. Whispers went from noblemen to noblewomen and back at the sight of the incredible prize, worth at least as much as half of the king's own treasury. "Thank you," said the princess, though she seemed less than delighted with the prize. "This is a very valuable prize, I'm sure, to all the land." She handed the ring to her father, who bowed slightly to the warrior. The warrior stepped back, a bit curious about the cold reception of his gift. "And you," said the queen to the hunter. The hunter, now dressed in a well-made doublet of green and wearing a feather cap, came forward pushing an object on wheels and covered with a velvet tarp. When he reached the steps of the thrones, he pulled it away and displayed for the princess a magnificent statue. It was carved of marble, with golden ornaments about all the figures. It displayed a scene of Progeny, the goddess of fertility and the hunt, pursuing her husband-to-be, Pastorius, the god of animal husbandry and leatherworking. Various animals of the hunt and pasture were arrayed around the lifelike image of the gods. "Here, princess," the hunter said, "I have brought you the greatest work of art in all the land. It was given to me by the artist as payment for a glorious hunt I engaged in for him, in which I tracked down the legendary white bear that slew his father, and took vengeance with my bow and sword." "Thank you," the princess said. She seemed sad to see the figure. "I'm sure it would be a blessed figure to display in either the hall or at the cathedral. Truly a worthy gift." The court again murmured over the princess's reaction to the incredible gift. Puzzled, the hunter stepped back. "What about you?" the princess said to the farmer, before her mother could step forward and address him. The farmer, still dressed in his simple clothes, looked about with hesitation as he stepped forward. He knelt in front of the princess and looked down. "I'm sorry, your highness," he said, "but I have not the capacity to meet such treasures. I am, after all, a simple man." "There is no shame in being simple," the princess said with a smile, "though I think you are far from it. I have but 3 humble gifts for you, if you will but let me give them, the farmer said.
Not fair, cried the hunter. The contest was for 1 gift.
My daughter's will shall rule in this matter, said the queen sternly. I will have them, the princess said. The farmer pulled from beneath his arm the jewelry box he had crafted, now well lacquered and shining with a deep oaken luster. He held it above himself, still looking away. I have little coin, so I made this for you, though now I feel it should be an even poorer gift than I thought. The princess turned the simple box over in her hands, enjoying the smooth texture of the wood. Why should this be a poor gift? Because it is clear to me now that you don't care much for jewelry, the farmer said, which makes this next gift all the worse. He drew from inside his jacket the pendant on the silver chain that had belonged to his mother, and held it up to the princess. She picked it up and turned it over in her hands. She chuckled. Worse? How so? It is clear to me that you don't care for carvings or for the gods, and this jewelry has the dreamer on the back of the mirror, the farmer said. But it was a dear treasure to my mother, and your kindness to me reminds me of her. I think these are wonderful, said the princess, and lifted the chin of the farmer so that she could look into his eyes. The dragon god is my favorite. What is your final gift? May I stand, your highness? The farmer asked. Of course, she said. The farmer stood up. He looked around him, at all the well-dressed men and women of the court, and the guards staring at him from beneath their shining armor, and at the king and queen, arrayed in power and majesty before thrones of wealth and beauty. His hands were trembling with anxiety and fright. He cleared his throat and took a deep breath, then looked into the princess's eyes. He sang then in the great hall, a song none there had heard before. Though his voice had a simple tone, it rang out in the hall as a clear, bright tenor, and everyone fell silent. This is how it went. When I first did set my eyes upon thee, I knew I would be prisoner evermore. To thy beauty, aloft for all to see, with just a glance you touched my very core. Even then you came and sat beside me, and into tighter chains my heart would bind. Within your voice my love grew like a tree, in disbelief to meet a beauty so kind. I've done everything that I can surely do. I've spent my life endeavoring more still, to win the heart and soul and mind of you, with arms and back and hands and sharpened quill. And if I cannot win, I'll sing this everlong. The last I have to give is this, my love, moon song. As the last note rang out, the hall stood silent. The lords and ladies looked on, some in wonder, others in shock of the song the farmer had just sung. The princess, however, was crying. Tears streamed down her face as she rejected the manners of the court and threw her arms around the farmer. That was beautiful, she said amidst the sobs. Did you write that for me? I did, the farmer said, though it was to a wordless tune I remember my mother humming to me at night. It is the greatest treasure I have ever been given, the princess said. So, my daughter, the queen interrupted, does this mean you have chosen a winner? I have, she said. I choose this man, who chooses cleverness over brute strength, humbly serves the kingdom rather than himself, chooses kindness over force, who delights my heart with the workings of his own. If you told me I could never be with him, I would run away. The court again mumbled to itself, shocked at what the future king might look like. Some seemed delighted, some seemed frustrated, but all of them understood the tears of the princess to be real, and respected their king as he spoke.
So be it, said the king. How shall you act as king, I wonder?
I will seek to find the peaceful and righteous path for the kingdom, your highness, the farmer said.
And what will you do if you cannot find that path? The king asked.
Defer to my wife, of course, the farmer said.
Then you are truly the most worthy suitor, the king said. No man can rule without a queen to support him.
Thank you, your majesty, the farmer said with a bow. And what shall we do with the other suitors? The queen said to the farmer. He looked back at the hunter and the warrior, with heads bowed in humility. They have learned enough this week to know their greatness has its limits, the farmer said. Yet it would also be a shame to not put such greatness to work. The future queen's forests and fields will need a marshal to manage them, and the country will always have need of brave generals for when wisdom fails.
It is good that you can see friends and enemies, the king said. A wise king knows when to fight and when to make peace. Let such appointments be your first as prince and royal consort.
The king raised his hands and clapped, and the crowd was dismissed, each turning to the other in wonder of how the simple farmer had bested the mighty men of the country and won the heart of the princess with cleverness, kindness, and heartfelt passion. As the crowd was dispersing, the king said quietly to the queen,
I never did figure out how we got invited to the court for this contest."
"It was I who sent for him," the queen said.
"Not that I would doubt the wisdom of my wife after all this," the king said. "But why?"
The queen smiled as she said, "I met him some time ago when I was riding my carriage outside the walls, and we had a wheel break. It was on a road running by his farm. He came out to help us, offering to fix the wagon. He also lent me the use of his horse, so that I could travel back here in a timely fashion, so as not to worry you. I tried to pay him, but he refused, saying that he was sure I would return the favor some day."
"And so you have," the king said.
"He will make our daughter very happy, so I think I might still owe him one," the queen said. "But I knew he would be the right choice."
"I should learn to defer to my queen more often," the king said.
"Do not fret over it, my love," the queen said. "It is your job to defend our daughter, and the farmer still had much to learn about himself, and much to prove, mostly to himself, before he could be ready to wed our daughter."
"All the same, I am glad," said the king.
The next week the princess and farmer were wed in the city cathedral, with all the royal court in attendance, as well as the hunter, the warrior, and the friends of the farmer still wearing their simple clothes. She was in a magnificent white dress, and he wore a formal suit, though it was simple compared to the lords and ladies in attendance. The newlyweds walked out the front steps of the cathedral to a waiting and cheering crowd, and over the din could be perceived a laughter as deep as the bedrock and filling the stones of the city, as if the spirit of a dragon was in their midst. They traveled to the castle, and at the reception the farmer uncorked an old dusty bottle and poured 4 glasses of wine, one for his bride, himself, and the king and queen. It was the best any of them had ever tasted. The farmer and the princess lived together at the castle mostly in peace and comfort, though each of them had a taste for adventure. They had many of those together before becoming king and queen, and many more after. Were they happy? Yes, for that is the biggest part of what it means to be in love.